Thank you all for joining us for our third session of Lunch and Learn. Today we are going to talk about unearned income. So this is Social Security, child support, student financial aid that we've got going on. Actually, that's in special circumstances, I think. So if we don't talk about financial aid today, it'll be next week. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. I have Dawn Brewer with me to help with polls and with the chat. She is going to post some links in the chat. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up. If you can see my lips moving but cannot hear me, please give me a thumbs down. Thank you all so much. I appreciate that feedback. Amy Hammond is here with me in the questions box. Any comments or questions will need to be fielded through the questions box. We are not going to raise hands or unmute for raised hands simply because we are on a limited amount of time and we want to be sure that we get through the whole presentation. My name is Kara Poli and I will be the presenter today. You should have received a couple of emails from me, one with all of the handouts and one with just the polls. We heard your feedback last week. We tried to work through a process that might work better. So you've got a small PowerPoint that I emailed you this morning that has just the poll questions, and you should have gotten that in the other email as well in PDF format. That is just going to be a resource that you can use because the poll questions when launched do cover up this slide. We'll try to leave enough time open, but in the event that it does cover and you do want to have a longer time to work that while the poll is posted, that is available for you on there. So without further delay, if you need closed captioning, you can click the CC in your GoToMeeting toolbar. The questions box is a little talk bubble with a question mark, and the handouts are all available in the thing that looks like a sheet of paper with a paper clip. There we go. Okay. We were having a sharing issue. We were worried it wasn't working. So as always, our mailing address, physical address, website, and department phone numbers are on your screen now. If you ever need to send us anything, please use the P.O. box. If you want to drive by and see where the magic happens, that's at the East 11th Street address. We are across the street from the Capitol, but our building is closed to the public and does not give tours like the Capitol does. But you can wave at us and we will wave back if we see you. Our website is going to be the wealth of information that you need to be successful with our program or with our programs. And it is going to have a lot of the resources that Dawn's going to put in the chat throughout the webinar. The website is where you're going to want to go to find those if you missed the links in the chat. And then the phone number, you can leave a voicemail or ask to be connected to a compliance monitor, and that will work there. The way today's going to work, we started at noon. It'll run to between 1 and 1:30, kind of depending on how many questions you guys ask. And we are planning to be here till 1:30, so please do not hold those questions. If your question is not about an unearned income topic, we will probably ask you to email us or hold it for the session that is about the topic that covers your question. Amy, Dawn, and I are here. We will answer questions. We will go through this webinar. We want you all to leave with all your questions answered. You will be prompted to complete a survey at the end. So if you do have additional questions or think of something after the fact, you can put it in that survey response or email us later on. Certificates will not be issued for this class, but you should get an email that says, hey, thanks for joining us. And that would be the proof if you needed it to send to your employer to show that you spent your hour-and-a-half lunch with us. I would encourage you to silence your phones and put an out-of-office email response just for this brief webinar. It's not lengthy, but it is going to be beneficial to you if you can focus on it. Please put any questions or comments in the questions box, and then the chat box will be where Dawn posts resources. Dawn, if I could get you to launch the very first poll so we can find out who we've got with us today. So this is just so that we kind of know who we're talking to, what we've got going on. It doesn't have any impact on how the training will go. It just helps us to know with regards to questions and just kind of who's attending our webinars and who our reach is getting out to. Leave that open for a little bit longer.
I think there might be like...
They cannot see the shared screen while there's a poll up.
Okay.
They can only see the poll, unfortunately. I have explored other ways for that to work, and that does not seem to be one.
Okay. For those of you who did not hear, you cannot see the shared screen while the poll is up. So if you're not seeing the shared screen right now, it'll come back once the poll is closed.
And we can go ahead and end the poll. Dawn, thank you. So now you should be back to seeing the shared screen. I can peek over at Amy's computer and tell that is happening. So the poll issue that we just encountered is the reason that I shared that PDF and those polls with you guys ahead of time, so that you have the opportunity to print them or open them on a separate window, so that you can kind of toggle back and forth if that's what's going to work best for you. But that's going to be the only way that I have found so far to where you can have the polls easily accessible while the poll box is up. So some resources and definitions, and we are going through these same ones every single week. So if you've been with me the last 2 weeks where we talked about the qualifying process and the earned income calculation process, you've already heard this. But if you're new to us this week and you are not sure how we calculate income or what told us how to calculate income, you're going to want to visit the HUD 4350. When these programs came into being, the creating entities said, hey, we're not going to recreate the wheel. HUD has been calculating income forever. We're going to use what they have. So Chapter 3 of the HUD 4350.3 tells us who counts as a household member and whose income should be included. And Chapter 5 tells us how to calculate income and income from assets. Then come along a little bit futuristic for me from that. And we have the Housing Opportunity through Modernization Act of 2016. I got tongue-tied there. That was Amy popping her head in.
I didn't mean it.
So the Housing Opportunity through Modernization Act of 2016, or HOTMA, as it will be affectionately called through the remainder of this presentation, came out and overwrote some of the guidance in Chapters 3 and 5 of the 4350. So if you find conflicting guidance, please refer to that HUD notice that Dawn just now put the link in the chat for. There is also a technical guide for determining income and allowances for the home program. Then 24 CFR 5.609 tells us what income is excluded. If it is listed as an excluded income source, you will not count it. And some of those are kind of an umbrella, but they're pretty detailed, and you can put in your search engine of choice 24 CFR 5.609, and that will come up with that list. If it's not listed on the excluded income list, it is to be included in the calculation of eligibility. There is a chance that you will come up with a one-off that HUD didn't think about. If you run into one of those, please feel free to reach out. But if you reach out and ask me if self-employment is to be included, I'm going to tell you yes. And if you ask if workers' comp is excluded, I'm going to tell you yes and say reference this, because those are pretty common. The Texas Administrative Code link did change fairly recently, so you're going to want to make sure that you have that current link. But it also became a little easier. You can see the whole rule for each section on the page when you click on it. And so you can do the Control F and search through the whole rule. So I definitely have found it to be a good shift, not anything too terribly problematic. Some multifamily compliance resources. If you are not operating in the multifamily compliance world, please know that this training is a little bit multifamily geared, and that is where these forms and manuals and rules and rent limits and stuff are coming from. So you may want to reach out to your program administrator and make sure that you have the correct forms for your program, and don't use the multifamily forms unless your program administrator says that you should. So we've got a section of our page that's dedicated to our forms. We've got our manuals and rules. We've got our income and rent limits, which has a handy income and rent limit handout that you can provide to your tenants during recertification if you would like to. It definitely helps with transparency. The multifamily compliance training and presentations are posted there on our training section of our website. The Lunch and Learn series will not be posted until mid-August. We're going to post them all at the same time instead of every single week. But weekly, they are being posted to our YouTube channel. So if you are a YouTube user, you can go to YouTube and type TDHCA into the search and come up with our YouTube channel, which is where these trainings are getting posted weekly. So this one should be up sometime between now and next week. The contact list for all of the multifamily staff is available at that compliance division staff link. And then if you are part of our TBRA program and need those resources, that is that very bottom link that you see there. Some definitions. I'm not going to tell you the asset definition because we're not talking about assets today. We are talking about income. And income is defined as all amounts, monetary or not, that go to or are received on behalf of the household, including minors. In some cases, earned income is excluded for minors, but the income we're going to talk about today would be included for minors. This can also include anticipated income. So if somebody tells you, hey, I just got my letter saying I'm going to start receiving Social Security, or I just found out I'm going to start receiving unemployment, that is going to be the anticipated income that you would use. Annual income includes all amounts not specifically excluded by regulation. And if you want a list of some income exclusions and some updated information, you can visit that HUD notice that's linked there, which is kind of the breakdown of HOTMA. You can read the whole HOTMA thing, the rule, but that HUD notice right there really breaks it down into a digestible form for us. We've got two terms today that we're going to use kind of throughout the webinar. Household is talking about anybody that lives there, even people whose income does not count towards eligibility. Family are going to be the members of the applicant group or of the household that must be included for purposes of eligibility. So a live-in aid is in your household. They're part of your applicant group, but they're not in the family. Same thing with foster persons. So are there any questions or concerns or any technical issues we're having that we need to address before we talk about?
Nope.
All right. So unearned income is what we're sharing and talking about today. And remember I said there's family members and household members, and you can see here they are broken out. And what we're looking at today is the other income. And you can see there is a yes next to every single type of family member, and a no next to live-in aid, foster adult, and foster child. So there's no asterisks next to the yeses in this column because unearned income counts in full no matter what. There's not a rule of 480 if they're a full-time student or anything like that. It is all of it because it is unearned income, including income from assets, and assets we will start not next week, but the following week. I think July 9th is the date for that one. So we did the application process on week 1. We talked about earned income last week. Now we're talking about unearned income. The excluded sources are listed here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see here there's quite a few. Workers' compensation is probably a big one that we see. Tax returns are excluded on the asset side, but they're not included as income ever. And then financial assistance, which I can't remember if we talk about this week or next week, but we will talk about that. VA benefits for HUD VASH voucher holders is new, and that's for tax credit and bond properties. You can exclude those if they are a VASH voucher holder. If they are a housing choice voucher holder, you would not exclude those VA benefits. Gifts for holidays, birthdays, or other significant life events are excluded. Retirement accounts are excluded as an asset, but if they're receiving regular disbursements, it's included. Lump sum additions like lottery winnings that are added to the assets are included as assets, but not income. But if they play the lottery regularly, or they go to a casino nearby regularly and they tell you, hey, every month I have about $200, $300 from this, that needs to be included as unearned income for the household. Can't see any others that are really kind of common. So this is the information about the VASH exclusion, the VA benefits. You can see at the bottom. It does not apply to housing tax credit or bond residents that do not receive assistance under the HUD VASH program. So you would want to be sure that if they are not receiving that VASH voucher, that you are including those VA benefits. Some examples of unearned income are going to be child support, alimony, Social Security and supplemental Social Security, monetary contributions, unemployment, annuities, retirements and pensions, financial aid, disability and VA benefits, and TANF, not food stamps, but actual TANF. This list is not exhaustive. These are just the more common ones that we see. So we've got a little caveat here. If somebody is having money recouped through Social Security or TANF or unemployment, and it is because they were overpaid, you can use the amount after the deduction. But if the deduction is for insurance or unpaid child support or a tax payment or something like that, you would use the gross amount. So the only time you would use an adjusted amount for these sources is going to be if the adjustment is made for prior overpayments. We've got our first example here. Based on the unemployment benefit statement, what is the amount of unemployment income that would be included in the calculation of eligibility? We can see a weekly benefit amount of $590, maximum possible benefits of $9,176, benefits paid to date $7,730, benefits remaining $1,446. We can look down there, see there's some deductions, but we know that from the previous slide that we're going to not worry about that because it doesn't say it's a deduction for a prior overpayment. Dawn, will you go ahead and launch the poll for slide, I think this is 16. We did last week.
So there's a question here, Kara, that you can answer while the poll is going. If there is someone who finished a certification like truck driving, so they got their CDL, and they plan to get a job, and they have a copy of their Indeed application, do you use this to project income?
No, that would not be an instance where you would use that to project income because there's not an offer letter. There's not a guaranteed job. That's something, you know, as much as they want to get the job, maybe there's not one open, maybe it takes 6 months, maybe it takes 3 months. I don't know. If you want to accept that as far as showing that, hey, they will be able to pay the rent, that is perfectly fine. But as far as eligibility purposes, I would not expect to see that in an eligibility calculation. All right, we've got some people still answering the polls. Hopefully the poll process works a little better this time and you're able to use those emailed printouts or the ones in the handout now. All right. Leave it open just a couple more seconds. I like to get to 50%, but we're not quite there yet.
So someone is a little confused about offer letter and the Indeed application. Can you go over that one more time?
So the question originally was about an Indeed application where it tells you that based on the jobs you're applying for and your skill set, you're projected to make this amount of money. That's different than an offer letter. That's somebody that's applying for a job. That would be like them bringing in their application to Whataburger and saying, hey, I'm applying at Whataburger. I feel confident I'm going to get it, but here's the anticipated income, but I don't have the job yet. That's not income you would use for eligibility. If they have an offer letter from Whataburger that says, hey, you're going to start this date, you're going to be a full-time regular employee at this amount of pay, your benefits are this, that sort of thing, that's what you would use as the verification for eligibility purposes. I apologize for that confusion. And I know that's different than unearned income, but I think that's still in the income vein, so it's worth bringing up. Dawn, we're good to close that poll. Thank you. So if you marked that it was 30,680 annually, that is correct. That is what you would do for every program except housing tax credit. Housing tax credit has a caveat that you can use the remaining benefits if the person does not anticipate the benefit to continue. But if you're a housing tax credit property and you use this allowance on some of your households, but not all of them, I'm going to question that. You need to have it outlined in your written policies and procedures of how you're going to handle unemployment if you're just housing tax credit. If you're layered with anything else, you're going to have to annualize the weekly payments. But if you're just housing tax credit, you could say, oh, we're only going to use remaining benefits if the person doesn't feel like it's going to continue. But if the person knows they're going to not find a job and request more, that kind of falls back in that. How do they know if they're going to find one or not going to find one? So you want to be sure that you've got a process in place and that your written policies and procedures addresses how you're going to handle this, and that you're not adjusting it based on how a household would be eligible or not. Any questions on unemployment? I only see the thing light up, so I don't ever know what they're about.
So what if you don't use the projected income to qualify, and then they get the job and it puts them OI?
The only time that's going to be an issue, the question is, what if you don't use the projected income and it puts them over the income limit? This is also an area where an owner can choose to be a little more conservative, except that you're going to inadvertently deny low-income Texans because they don't have that income. If they move into your, and Amy will jump in here if I tell you wrong on this. If they move into your property today and they get a job next week, they were eligible on the day that they certified and moved in. They got the job the week after. But if they come in to recertify a year from today and you find out they started their job last week, now we have an issue where that needs to be verified back at the time of move-in. You catch it before we come out and catch it. It's due diligence. Hopefully it doesn't put them over the income limit, but that's an instance we could talk about separately. I don't want to derail this unearned income webinar talking about earned income and offer letter situations, but hopefully that kind of cleared that up. We're good to keep going, or you want to?
And just so you know, if you did a recertification, you found out they got a job 2 months after, and their application says they were looking for a job, they just got their CDL, they were looking for a job, and then at recertification, you find out they did get a job, maybe a month later, maybe 3 weeks later, whatever the case may be, and they do go OI, they were eligible when they moved in, and OI is not non-compliant. It only becomes non-compliant when you violate the next available unit rule. This question is saying, how did you get 30,000?
I put the math back up there.
Okay.
So $590 a week times 52 weeks maths out to 30,680 annually, and that's what we would use for eligibility purposes for this unemployment statement.
Oh, so for unemployment, do they need to certify with an affidavit that they do not anticipate applying for more benefits to support using the remaining benefits for the housing tax credit exemption?
I think that's a great idea. The question is that do they need to somehow certify that, yes, they're getting unemployment, no, they don't intend to apply for more funds, or yes, they do intend. I think you would need to have both of those options so that you could answer that. And I see that a lot in tenant files, but that's just going to help the strength of your file as well. Does that get us caught up?
I think so.
Okay. So the next piece of unearned income we're going to talk about is child support or alimony. And alimony is going to kind of fall under the same umbrella as child support. So most of our, or all of our examples are about child support, but if you had somebody with alimony, you would calculate it the same way. One of the changes with HOTMA is that you only count what's being received. You no longer are concerned with the court-ordered amount, and are they working with the enforcement agency? Are they trying to obtain the full amount? That's no longer an issue. One thing that came out along the same time frame that HOTMA was made into law was the Paperwork Reduction Act, and if you want to Google that, you can do so, and you can find all the information and read the whole act. But kind of the meat and potatoes of it is that you no longer need to get the court order for child support. Part of the goal of this was, one, to save our natural resources, and two, to stop making applying for assistance and housing a cumbersome process for folks when there's a simpler way to get the information. And the simpler way is to get the verification from the enforcement agency or to have the household or applicant member print their payment history. You need to obtain a current pay history at the time of application or certification if they are getting child support through a court-ordered enforcement agency. And you need to include the payments received within 120 days of the certification effective date. If it's not court-ordered and they tell you, oh, he just gives me $150 a month, or oh, she just pays me $300 a month, that needs to be done through a monetary gift letter from the person providing the cash support. If you can't get a gift letter, the household can self-certify to that, but we would anticipate seeing something from the non-custodial parent that pays the child support telling us that they're paying this much. So again, only the amounts received by the applicant or tenant will be considered when calculating income for eligibility. Payments should be calculating by averaging the payments received within the 120 days of the certification. So there are lots of date calculators online. You put the date they're planning to certify, and then you tell it to count backwards 120 days, and that's what you're going to use for calculating your income from child support based on the payments received. We've got several examples for child support, and they're all kind of, there's a couple different formats for them. So this one, we've got Kara, the other one, not me, has a court order to receive $425 per month, but her ex-husband does not pay. She has certified to this fact. However, Kara has made no effort to collect the child support. The payment history received from the Attorney General indicates that payments are not being made. True or false, we must count the full $425 per month as income. Dawn, we can go ahead and launch this poll. It does not have math that needs to be worked out. So most of you guys out in the world have fully implemented HOTMA, followed our guidance, done what was supposed to be done. We've been monitoring under HOTMA guidance or HOTMA requirements since January 1st, 2024. But I have seen several properties fairly recently that are still getting full court orders. And that, I understand, is a hard habit to break, but it needs to be broken. We do not need court orders anymore. You do not need 6 months of bank statements, which we'll talk more about for assets. So you want to be sure that you are following that guidance that came out of that Paperwork Reduction Act and the HOTMA requirements, because that is how we are monitoring and how households should be qualified as eligible today and currently. All right, Dawn, we can go ahead and close that poll. So if you marked false, you are correct. Kara is not receiving child support. So this does not have to be included. She's filled out a form. She's told us, hey, I'm ordered to get it, but I don't receive anything. You sent the form. It backed that up. You're good to go to exclude that $425 from her income because she is not receiving it. Now we've got an applicant who's provided a pay history showing that they're receiving child support of $290 every month. The applicant told you that they are then returning all that money to the non-custodial parent because they have mutually agreed upon a change to the child support order and are now sharing custody. Does the full child support amount need to be included as income? I think this is a yes or no. Maybe it's true or false, but Dawn, we're good to launch that poll.
Kara, do you have to verify child support for everyone, even if they state they don't get it?
When I was a property manager, that was our company policy, but no, that is not required. If they tell you they don't have child support, and your ownership and management group is okay with you having the certification in the file, unless there's something else that makes you think maybe they do, you would be fine with that self-certification. And that's another instance where at recertification, if they tell you, oh yeah, I am getting it, and you go back and see that they were getting it at move-in, you would want to correct that as a due diligence review, and make sure that that's updated. All right, we still got a few people.
Just a reminder, when you guys do follow-up questions, I don't see the original question, so I need more detail. I have no idea what you guys are asking in a lot of things.
All right, Dawn, I think we're good to close the poll. Thank you. So if you said that yes, it needs to be counted, you are correct. The child support has to be included in the family's annual income for calculation because the pay history reflects receipt of payments. It is up to that family to go to the enforcement agency and make those changes through the proper channels. Additionally, this is a disposed of asset that probably would need to be addressed because they are getting money and they are giving money away. They're not purchasing anything or paying a bill with it. So that's just kind of another way to think through this. And this example was one that we were emailed that we thought was a great thing to put in the training because I feel like you guys might run into this relatively, not necessarily all the time, but frequent enough that you need an answer for it. So now we've got a 9LL01 form, and we can see here that the family is certifying on January 21st. I've blown up their child support payments and put a box around the ones that are within the 120 days. Give you guys just a second to look at that. Remember, we're only counting what's paid. Let Dawn launch that poll, please. So we can see, you can see that they were ordered $562 a month, but they're receiving $258. Looks like every other week. And if you look at these two options, one of them, the top one, is counting the full court-ordered amount, and the bottom one is counting what the household receives. You can see that they are close, but they're not quite exact. So it would be important to make sure that you are using the correct calculation because we do not want to deny folks that qualify with the way to calculate income. And this is not an instance where the owner would need to be more conservative because we are only going to look at the 120-day received payments. All right, Dawn, I think, well, we still got a few people answering. All right, thank you, Dawn. So the easy math is the best math. We'd take 258 times 26. If you added all those 258s up, divided by the number of days, and then multiplied by 365 and got a different number, that math would still be acceptable as well. But I like easy math, and I can see that that's every other week. So I did 258 times 26. However, I know most of you are going to ask about that $2,535 payment. It is outside of the 120 days, and it is also a one-time lump sum. That could have been a back pay, that could have been a tax return that was filed late, or a tax garnishment that got received after the normal time frame. If we see a large payment like that, that's a one-off, we're not going to include that. Now, if every single month they had been receiving one large payment, I would say that that's probably regular, needs to be included, but this is one time over the course of 4 months. So I think this would be fair to exclude from the child support calculation. We've got another example here. What is the amount of child support to be included for this household that's certifying March 1st? 120 days backwards from March 1st is November the 1st. So I have put in a box those amounts. We can see that they get $147 a month. What is their amount of child support for eligibility purposes? Dawn, can you launch that poll for me? Thank you. Did we have any questions? Okay. And this is an example using the pay history that they can get for you. So if you don't have good luck faxing the verification request to the Attorney General's office, or they want to move in quicker than you usually get those back, they can log into their child support platform and they can get this for you. They can get the current pay history for you. All right, we're almost to 50% response. All right, Don, if you want to go ahead and close that poll. Thank you. So for those of you that said it was 147 times 12, that's what we're going to use. I don't see any reason we would do any other sort of calculation. It doesn't look like it's the same day every month, but every month they receive 147. So that is the math that I would do and the way that this would be calculated for eligibility purposes. Now we've got one that's not quite as clean as maybe those last two. We've got some sporadic payments. So what is the child support to be included in the calculation of eligibility for Esther Cruz with the certification date of February 1st? Counting backwards is October the 4th. So you can see in the box, we've got a payment of 120, payment of 75, and a payment of 50. And those are the ones that we would want to calculate. Leave that up for just a second, and then we'll launch the poll. All right, Dawn, if you want to go ahead and launch the poll. That's exactly the example we're doing right now. We just got a question in, but it is almost exactly the example we're doing right now, so we are walking through it. Oh, we've got people taking bites of their lunch, so they're not answering the poll. I'll leave it open just a little bit longer. All right, Don, if you want to go ahead and close that poll. So for this one, where did the math go? We're going to add those 3 payments together, divide by 3 months because we can tell it's 1 payment per month. So there's no need for us to do the extra math and add up the days and figure all that out. Remember, I like easy math. So 245 divided by 3 months gets us an average of 8167 times 12 months gets us 980 annually for the calculation of child support for this household. Were there any questions about this one?
Do you have the answers in here?
I don't, but they will get emailed if they're attendance.
Okay.
I email all the people that attend.
Okay.
I usually don't tell them that until the end, though. So the next type of income we're going to talk about is Social Security. If your household gets Social Security, you're going to count the gross amount prior to any deductions, unless the deduction is a result of overpayment. Then it can be removed from the calculation of income. But if the deduction is for any other reason like insurance, Medicare, etc., it cannot be removed from the calculation of income. You will include payments received by adults, adults on behalf of any family members, and family members under the age of 18. You will exclude Social Security received by live-in aides, foster adults and foster children, and adults on behalf of foster persons, because that income is tied to that foster person, not the adult that is the payee. So we've got a learning point here. We've got a Social Security award letter dated September 2nd, 2024. They are certifying October 1st, 2024. The Social Security Administration announced a COLA increase of 2.5% on October 10th, 2024. What is our calculation for eligibility? It looks like they get $1587.20, and then they have a Medicare deduction. And then their net amount is $1438, but it's a Medicare deduction, not a overpayment deduction. So we're going to use the gross amount. Dawn, if you want to go ahead and launch that poll. All right, a couple more seconds for this one. All right, Dawn, if you want to end this one. Thank you. So for this one, because they are moving in, they are certifying before the COLA is announced. You can't tell the future, I can't tell the future, and Amy can't tell the future. No matter how hard we try, we don't know what the COLA is when they certify on October 1st. That letter is dated September 2nd. So the 2023 benefits or COLA amount is already included. We would use the $1,587.20 times 12 months to get the annual income of $19,046.40 annually. Hopefully that makes sense. But now with the same Social Security award letter, they're not moving in until December 1st. So September 2nd is still within 120 days. We're good there as far as the time frame for that. And We know the COLA amount at this point. So this person came in and applied. They said, hey, we want to move in December. The COLA was announced. We know we have to take that into account. So what is our Social Security amount now going to be for our certification period? Don, if you want to launch the poll. This one's like dueling banjos between those last two options. I wonder if on the recording you can see the polls or if it still shows my screen. I have to watch one and find out. So on those last two, you can see that they are very close. They're within $40 of each other. So if this is a single person household, that might not cause an issue if you did this the wrong way. But if there's multiple sources of income and they're really close to the limit, that $40 could make a really big difference. Well, a couple more, give people a little bit longer to. All right, Don, if you want to close that one. So for this one, we've got our COLA announcement. You guys put these in the file. That's great. We appreciate that. We need to calculate 1 month. We need to calculate December at the $1587.20. Then we need to determine our COLA increase, which is just under $40. And then we need to figure out our new monthly amount for the other 11 months of the certification period. That's that $1,626.88. Multiply that by 11 months. And then we need to add the two amounts together to get an annual income of $19,482.88. And this is why it is important to know to keep an eye on those things that impact eligibility, like the COLA announcement. You're going to want to, at the beginning of October, it's always right around the 10th, 11th, 12th. You're going to want to be keeping an eye out for this because that's going to impact your folks that have Social Security. It is my understanding that the amount is going to either remain the same or decrease this year, but do not hold me to that. I do not work for Social Security and I do not have an inside track to that. That is just the speculation in the world. So you need to be paying attention to that because if you have applicants that apply before the COLA is announced and they receive Social Security, but they're moving in or certifying after the Social Security announcement of COLA, you're going to need to update those tenant files and make sure that that eligibility is current and correct and still within the limits. The year that it was the 8.9 increase, that did cause some eligibility issues in some files that we reviewed. Generally, when it's 2.5%, it's not a huge deal with regards to that, but it still needs to be double checked and verified. All right. One thing that we do at the department is we update the cost of living adjustments and we include the inflationary adjustments by HUD. This does not get posted until after the COLA comes out. So HUD will announce their stuff beginning of August, beginning of September. Last year is the beginning of August. Statute requires that it's done at the beginning of September. So we'll see when they get it out this year. And I will put everything in the chart. And then when the COLA comes out, I will add the COLA. And then we will post this to our website. It's on our forms website, I believe. That's going to be available for use for you guys as just kind of a quick cheat sheet if you are not sure where to find all these things independently of each other. Well, do we have any Social Security questions before we keep going through the examples?
We're good.
Okay. So Charles is applying with his 10-year-old niece, Daisy. Daisy receives Social Security benefits due to the death of a parent. She receives $744 per month. How much income should be included in the calculation of eligibility for this family? Dawn, if you want to launch this poll, this one's a little simpler on the math side. And if you need to reference back to whose income counts, go back to that beginning. I think it was slide 6 or 7 maybe, that had our chart that showed unearned income counted for whom. If you guys are liking how we're doing the polls this week versus last week, can you give me a thumbs up? If this sending the polls out in a separate attachment is still not working, I need to go back to the drawing board, let me know. All right, so I think that's helpful. So that will probably be how we will do that through this lunch and learn session. Lots of thumbs up.
For what?
That the polls are working better this time, where they've got them separate from the big attachment that was made. I did actually break my email trying to email you all these things, because there were so many people registered for this webinar. So good problem to have. We got it fixed, but if my responses were delayed, that was why. All right, Dawn, I think we're good to close the poll. Somebody got my joke. Thanks. I appreciate the giggle face. So we're going to count 8,928 annually, because unearned income or other income for dependents, children under 18, counts towards the household income. So we would count $8,928 for eligibility purposes, even though Daisy is a minor. This isn't her job. This is unearned income that she's going to receive. And if she receives this and at some point it stops because Charles's income changes and she's no longer eligible for it, or whatever the case may be, you would want to document the file correctly to explain that stopping, because it may raise questions if there's just Social Security one year and then not the next year. But in theory, this would go until Daisy was 18 or 21, and it would be something that would be included in their eligibility for the whole time that she lived in the unit. Were there Social Security questions we needed to talk about?
No.
Okay. So the next piece of the unearned income puzzle we're going to talk about is the monetary gifts or family support. This is any amount that's received from persons outside the family, and it must be included for purposes of income eligibility calculation. This could be if somebody's paying the rent for your household, or they're paying utilities, cash contributions received on a regular basis, financial assistance provided for the support of a child in the family, or financial assistance provided to assist a student family member. This does not include groceries that are brought to the family or food donations from the food bank or anything like that. It does not include contributions paid directly to a child care provider by persons not in the household, does not include gifts for birthdays, weddings, or other major life events, and it does not include tenant-based rental or utility assistance from federal or state programs where income is evaluated to determine assistance. So if they get a check every December from the Catholic Church, that needs to be included in eligibility if you've had them as a tenant long enough to know, or they disclose that to you. But if they get utility assistance as part of their housing choice voucher, that does not have to be included as income. Or if they're participating in a utility assistance program through one of the community action agencies, a lot of times they have to have their income screened for that as well. So that would be something that would not be included as income. We've got an example here. What is the calculation of income based on the monetary contribution letter below? It says, I provide my friend a monthly gift of $400. The gift has no end date and is paid every month. Please feel free to contact me with any questions. I'm going to have Dawn launch that poll. This is pretty simple math, I think. And I get a lot of emailed questions about how do we document this? How do we make sure that they really are giving the monetary contribution? And that's something that you need to outline in your written policies and procedures to tell folks what your expectation is if they tell you this is their income. But that's less on the eligibility side and more on the how are you going to pay your rent side. So that's not something that we're going to necessarily speak to. I know a lot of folks are getting bank statements or notarized statements, that sort of a thing. All right, Dawn, I think we've still got some people answering. We'll hold for just till we get to a minute. All right, Dawn, we're good to close that poll. Looks like almost all of you agree this is going to be 4,800 annually. Take the 400 times 12, 4,800 annually. Are there any questions on monetary gifts? I don't think there are any monetary gift questions. So we will keep going. The next type of unearned income is periodic payments. These are benefits that the applicant has paid into over time usually, and once matured, the monthly benefits are paid out. You will include verifiable anticipated increases, which usually follow the Social Security COLA or the cost of living adjustments. These can be from annuities, insurance policies, pension or retirement funds, disability or death benefits. And then there may be other types, but those are the more common ones. So we've got an example here from the teacher's retirement system. What is the amount of retirement income that should be included in the determination of eligibility for this household? And we can see there that it started in 2019 and now it is still going. Currently, we've got an update letter from December that we can see that there's some taxes and some insurance deducted, but we know because we've paid attention in training, we're going to use that top amount, the $1,658.36. Dawn, if you want to launch that poll. Leave that open for just a few more seconds. Give everybody a chance to respond. All right, Dawn, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and close that poll. So we're going to take 1,658.36 times 12. We've got our letter that says that's still the gross amount. You can ask them for this. I did not start seeing this in files that were receiving TRS until late of 2024, but this is something that they can get through TRS or that TRS is providing. I don't know if this is something they can get in their portal or if they have to call, but this is something that's available because some of those original retirement and annuity award letters have the original date from when it was awarded. You can see there that this one started in 2018 or 2019 and is still going and still the same. With regards to retirement accounts, we've got two scenarios here. We've got Wendy, who is 75 years old and has retired this year. She is contributing to her IRA, and because she's over the age of 72, is receiving $6,450 per quarter in required disbursements. The retirement account is no longer considered an asset as of January 1st, 2024, but that $6,450 per quarter is going to be included as regular income for the family. Even if she took all of it out at once a year or every month or every quarter, that is income to her household because it is a required mandatory disbursement. But now we've got Carolyn, who's only 40 and has not retired and is not retirement age. She is contributing to her 401k, but had to take some money out of her 401k to pay for expenses incurred. She's taking these out as withdrawals and not loans. The retirement account is still not an asset, but her withdrawals are also excluded from income because it's kind of like withdrawing her money from her own savings account. Granted, she's going to have to pay some penalties and taxes on that, but this would not be considered income for Carolyn's household. I'd like to wait just a second. Let me answer that one live. Okay. So the next question, the next special item is any portion of a fund paid directly to an applicant's former spouse within the terms of a divorce decree, annulment, or legal separation is excluded from their income. This applies to annuities, Social Security, state, local, or private pensions, or anything that's authorized by the Office of Personnel Management. If the former spouse is applying, the court-ordered amount would be included in their income. This might be an instance where you do need the court order, or where you need to at least have that portion of it. They should tell you this, and some of them I've seen do get letters from Social Security or from the pension saying that it's a spousal benefit or that sort of a thing. And you would have to include this or exclude it depending on which direction your applicant was involved in the divorce decree or the annulment. We have a form on our website called a zero income certification. I get a lot of questions asking if this is really necessary, and I do think that this is a great form, and I do like seeing it in files. It's not required, but it is helpful as a due diligence tool to make sure that all income sources are screened for. So it asks all the questions and says, you know, how do you get this? Do you get this? Do you get this? And so if somebody answers yes, it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, well, you're not truly a zero income household. It also gives you the option to ask, how are you going to pay your bills if you have no income? And a lot of times that's because they're a dependent, they're in school, they're not working, they're living with a parent, or they're a stay-at-home parent or a stay-at-home spouse, and the other spouse pays the bills, or the other parent pays the bills for them. And so that's kind of how we usually see this. If you at your company want to develop your own form that has your company name at the top, that's fine. I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel, but this is available for your use, and you can use it as a guide if you want to develop your own form. But this is on our forms website that Dawn put the link in early on during the webinar. Some tips to minimize challenges. All verification forms need to be completed in their entirety. You want to make sure that all household income is certified and verified if required. You want to make sure that all verifications and certifications are current within 120 days, and that forms are tested for integrity, clarifications are present, there's no evidence of tampering or perfecting, and that there's no whiteout or correction fluid. I see whiteout on almost every trip I go on. So I know that that is still something that folks are using in the field, and that needs to be gone. So if you have whiteout on your desk right now, pull it out, put it away so you're not tempted, put it away from wherever you process files so you're not tempted to use it. Go through a peer review process if you can. Make sure that tenant file tells the story. And if you have a third-party compliance or consultant that reviews your files, that's great. Use them as a resource, not as something that you dislike having to send stuff to, because I know they are a benefit. I know they sometimes ask for corrections, but they're looking at it to make sure that it has all the T's crossed and I's dotted so that when we come out, your files are in good order. That is all I have for unearned income. So we will talk about the student stipulations, the Section 8 verifications, kind of all the different caveats and different income exceptions next week. when we talk about income special circumstances. Dawn can put the link to register for the remainder of the Lunch and Learns in the chat. I hope you will join us, and now we have plenty of times to answer questions. Or Amy, if you have anything to add.
Not right now, I don't.
Okay. She's responding to a question in the chat.
Can you go back to slide 6?
Yes.
I have no idea.
I don't remember what's on slide 6. Slide 6 is list of links.
Slide 6 is a list of links.
If you wanted slide 6, we're probably going to need, if you're saying slide 6 out of the poll slides, those, I had to condense that, so those slide numbers do not correlate to the slide number in the training. So if you can give me an idea of which example you want to re-see, I can pull that up.
So here's a good question. Is Social Security or income from adopted children counted?
Social Security received on behalf of an adopted child or a child that's in the process of an adoption is included as income for the household. The ones that it's not included for are foster persons, whether that's a kinship foster agreement or a formal foster agreement. You would have to have the foster agreement from DFPS, and it's going to look like a court order. That's an instance where you would have to have that big document in the file. But that would be when it's excluded. But for adopted children or children in the process of being adopted, it is
excluded.
It is not. It's not excluded for that. So I think there was a question on the excluded.
So she's confused about income received from a retirement.
So the income received from a retirement account, you can see that it says except for periodic payments. That is asset income, interest income. Maybe I need to update this slide to say interest income received from a retirement account.
Yeah, because that goes into the asset side.
Yeah, that goes into the asset side, which we will talk about a little bit when we talk about assets. But you will count periodic payments. You will just not count the interest or dividend income that might come from a retirement account. But it has to be a retirement account from the, as identified by the IRS as an applicable or as an allowable retirement account. Amy and I got an email this week that was I think it was a mutual fund, but nowhere in it did it say it was an IRA or any sort of retirement account. So it was not excluded on the asset side, and it was included, and then they did have income from it. So any other questions? Anything you guys want me to expand on some more? I appreciate you all joining us today. I see folks jumping off. You will be prompted to complete a survey. I do appreciate your responses and your feedback on there. Be as honest as you want to be. I've got thick skin and my feelings don't get hurt too terribly easily. I like to know how these are landing and what you guys would like to see better or what you guys enjoyed about the way they're being presented and what other topics you would like to see presented. I am working on the 2026 office hours topics. So those are kind of where your suggestions are headed right now. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. Do you have any other questions to go over? Ooh, that's a good one.
If the head of household is payee for a child that is not listed in her household, is it counted as part of the household income?
So if the Social Security letter, if the person tells you, yes, I get Social Security, but it's for my child who lives with the other parent, that or a child who is 18 but still gets the benefits, but they're the payee. If that income stays with the household, then it needs to be counted as income. But if they say, hey, it goes into their bank account, I'm just also listed on their bank account as the payee, I don't use that for my bills, I don't use it for my household, then it would not need to be included in your applicant household as a calculation for eligibility purposes. We have still got some time for questions. I've still got the recording going so that our folks that are watching this after the fact can get the benefit of any of your asked questions. Our next Lunch and Learn is going to be Wednesday, July the 2nd, and we're going to talk about special circumstances for income. I hope that you will join us there. We do have quite a lot of you already registered.
Do they need to keep requesting the retirement letter every year if the amount is always the same and states that the date when the amount began?
So the question is, for an example like this, do they need to continuously request the letter? I would say no if you can reasonably determine COLA increases or that the amount has stayed the same. Your owners and management companies may have a difference of opinion there and want you to get a current letter. But this is one of those, I know you guys are sick of hearing me say it, but we don't want to make it cumbersome for low-income Texans to find affordable housing. We want to make it a process that makes sense, that is not too terribly, kind of in the weeds. But if you need a current letter, you need a current letter. But if they've got, like this one, you can see it's for life, I would say that is acceptable there. And so if you have questions that you didn't want to or think of after the fact, please feel free to email myself or Amy or Dawn. Any of us are happy to answer the questions. Dawn, if you could put those email addresses in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it, or the link to the contact list.
So this is if someone from outside of the household is the payee, but it goes to the applicant.
So if somebody outside the household is the payee, but the applicant gets the income from Social Security, that would be considered in the calculation of income. And you would want to have a self-certification that explains that, that says, oh, my mom is my payee. She's not going to live in the household, but because I'm under 21, I can't be my own payee for whatever reason. That would be something that you would still count towards the income for eligibility purposes of your applicant household. Leave it open for about 3 more minutes, and then we will wrap. We've got lots of people jumping off. Dawn's putting email addresses in the chat. Thank you, Dawn, for handling the polls and the chat. Thank you, Amy, for handling the questions box. And thank you guys for all your claps and thumbs up and kind words through the questions box. I appreciate that. Couple more minutes to ask your questions. Hopefully everybody got to eat a good lunch while they were watching. I ate mine before. It's hard to talk and eat at the same time. All right. I am seeing nothing new popping in, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for all, unless Amy or Dawn has anything else to add. Oh, looks like I got one question just came in. Let Amy answer that one. Thank you guys again for joining us. We will see you next week, July the 2nd at noon. Bring your lunch, and we will talk about income special circumstances. So everybody that wants to know about financial aid for students, that's where that'll happen. I apologize for for getting that today.